So here we are in 2020, over 3.5 years later, and we're still in the EU. We can, however, be cautiously optimistic that with Boris in charge, we might actually get there this time. At the end of the month, it seems, we will officially no longer be a member state of the European Union. And that might well be something to celebrate. It's not a done deal yet, and even after 31st, we will still be aligned with the EU, whatever that means. Hopefully that is not just a euphemism for not actually leaving. But allow me to break the habit of a lifetime and permit myself a fair degree of optimism. Boris, with an overall majority of 80 odd seats, now has the ability at least to drive as hard a bargain as he wants. I'm hoping that he does actually want that. That's where the optimism comes in. As we all know, Boris was ambivalent about Brexit at the time. We all know that he had two speeches prepared for the morning after, a leave one and a remain one. I'm trying not to focus too much on the fact that he had made positive remarks and, even if I remember correctly, a television programme about the good of the European ideal, before finally getting off the fence and throwing his considerable weight behind the leave vote. So, not being my normal, miserable, pessimistic self, I'm feeling a guarded lightening of the spirits regarding the realistic possibility of the referendum result finally being delivered. And the reality of that may just bring with it its own momentum to finalise, or not, a deal with the EU by the end of the year. So I'm thinking that I will take up Nigel Farage's invitation to be at Parliament Square on the 31st to hear the specially arranged bongs of Big Ben and have a bit of a party. That'll be welcome in the dark days at the fag end of January. Maybe I'll meet some of you there. But this month should be but a brief respite from the bigger opportunity that Brexit beckons. Because, as I have maintained for some time, Brexit is only tangentially about Brexit. Without wanting to rehash old campaign slogans, and despite what the Ramonas have said, Brexit really is about taking back control. Early on in this period, when Parliament was still warming up to its Brexit wrecking mission by erecting its first obstacles to delivering on the vote, many in the media couldn't contain their glee. Well, this is what you all wanted, isn't it? They taunted when Parliament began to erroneously claim its position as being sovereign. Isn't that what you meant by taking back control, with the British Parliament imposing its will? Well, no, it wasn't. That isn't what we all meant, although it might have been if we had thought that Parliament was on our side. As we failed to fall for this cheap trick, and very quickly realised that Parliament was very definitely, obviously, and not to say quite openly on the side not of us, the British people, but in fact on the side of the EU, the phrase take back control took on a whole new meaning. As many of us had suspected, and probably for some time, that the political establishment were not actually working for us, the people who pay their wages, along with their not inconsiderable expenses, but were in fact primarily just working for themselves and using the EU as cover for not representing us into the bargain. Our hands are tied, they shrilled, and then told us what a good thing the EU was. It didn't take us long to realise that the much demonised, faceless bureaucrats of Brussels weren't the only ones we needed to get rid of. In fact, as bad as they weren't even the primary villains of this democratic charade. It was our very own Parliament, our British Parliament, that was the clear and present existential danger to democracy in our time. So, one referendum, 3 elections later, it seems as if we might actually get our way. In June of 2016, it seemed that would be a relatively straightforward matter. 3.5 years later, we have come to realise how precious democracy really is, how close it came to being overturned by a self-interested elite and lost forever, and just how sweet it is that it's the common populace of taxi drivers and nurses, factory workers and scaffolders, self-employed tradesmen and care workers, along with all the others, by refusing to have their voice silenced, have used democracy in its truest and most glorious sense to vanquish the MPs, the Lords, the majority of the legal profession and the mainstream media, along with much of globalised business, and sweetest of all, the super-privileged anti-democrat in the form of one Gina Miller. And what's best of all is that we didn't need to break any heads to do it. The innate reasonableness of the British population has triumphed over those who think they know better. And if that's not something to celebrate, I don't know what is. It's at this point that I think we need to give some thanks and appreciation to a different bunch of faceless functionaries. For they are crucial to us, to Brexit, and to any and all democracies around the world. They are the people who count the votes. Free and fair elections rely on such people, and yet they are never mentioned. What we have to remember is that those people also have a viewpoint and an opinion. When we, Leaver and Remain activists get all hot under the collar about Brexit, when we believe in the inherent rightness of our own positions, how many of us would be tempted to let our own prejudices influence our honesty? When we found out that our political masters and our supposed betters were so ready to try every which way to frustrate and stymie and ultimately find a way of not delivering on their promise, the vote counters just did their job. At least, given the relative paucity of accusations of anything underhand, I'm assuming that they did. And they should be applauded for that. But again, as I've said many times before, Brexit should just be the start of things, not the end. If I have a disappointment, it's that the Brexit Party failed to turn their considerable support into any seats at all. Unlike my contemporary YouTuber, Politico, whose political radar is so much sharper than mine, I was surprised by that, and like I say, disappointed. Not because I'm a huge fan of Nigel Farage, even though I appreciate the massive thing that he's done, and I was mightily impressed with his much criticised and obviously reluctant decision to stand down against all sitting Tories, but because I was hoping for a third parliamentary force in British politics. I was hoping that the Brexit Party could be there to hold the Tories' feet to the fire in their dealings with the EU from this point on. Because although Boris is basking in glory at the moment, and most people are indulging in his landslide victory, we have to remember that the Tories treated Farage and the Brexit Party abominably, used their political machine not just to vanquish the ridiculous and deservedly unelectable anti-working class Labour Party, which in the event wasn't difficult, they also took the chance to neuter an existential threat in the form of the Brexit Party. Going forward, the Tories will continue to be delighted to have such a weak opponent flailing around with only arch-Remainer Keir Starmer, English-hating Emily Thornberry, and of all people, Jess Phillips as their only weapons. The Brexit Party had, in my opinion, a much more impressive set of candidates, which could still make them a threat to the Tories if they don't deliver. The fact that they are at present unknown quantities makes it difficult for the Tories to assess their potential. The spectre of a hung Remainer parliamentary alliance, shudderingly promoted by the Tories, had the desired effect of driving most of the undecided into the arms of the Tories, rather than the Brexit Party. And that's a shame, because as Claire Fox has repeatedly stated, the Tories don't own Brexit, they have appropriated it. Boris may seem like a true believer now, but it's at least as likely as not that his motivation for taking a Brexit line had as much to do with saving the Conservative Party, and by extension his position as Prime Minister, as it did to delivering on the referendum result. You can't trust the Tories any more than you ever could, All that can really be said is that you can trust them more than you can trust the Labour Party. And that ain't saying a great deal. And just as the Tories are capable of appropriating Brexit, they are equally capable of burying it in a Brexit in name only, or Brino, if it suits their purpose. Boris has made much of his oven-ready Brexit, but being a voraciously ambitious Tory politician, I think it's safe to assume that the entity that Boris is most concerned with is Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson. The positive thing about Johnson, though, is that unlike Jeremy Corbyn, for instance, he appears to actually like being British. And his ego is such that, at least for the moment, his interests will probably coincide with those of the United Kingdom as a whole. My impression is that he will want to do a good job, not only because of the chance of being re-elected, but also because he will have one eye on the history books. But as a Tory, first and foremost, he will want to get back to politics as usual. And that's where we'll have to keep an eye on him, because politics as usual in this case will be the Tories, with their thumping great majority, doing whatever they please for the next 5 years, whilst relentlessly taunting a defeated, humiliated and directionless Labour Party. That's the kind of two-party state they want. As evidenced by their treatment of the Brexit Party and their demands that Farage stand down all his remaining candidates, so the Tories could hoover up all their votes as well. What they definitely do not want is an emerging third force, second-guessing Boris at every turn and holding his feet to the fire. And therein lies the danger of returning to politics as usual. But Brexit is an opportunity, and it's an opportunity the like of which most of us have never experienced. Like all opportunities, there are dangers ahead, but that shouldn't blind us to the opportunities. And Boris's momentum is showing us little clues of what possibly might be. The proposal to downgrade not having a television licence from a criminal offence to a civil matter, which could signal the beginning of the end of the BBC. Serious proposals to reduce, reform or even abolish the House of Lords. Far-reaching reform of the civil service, repeal of the Fixed-Term Parliaments Act, the neutering of the Supreme Court to prevent judges from interfering in politics. These are tantalising glimpses of what could be if we, as a society, continue to keep the pressure on through Brexit and beyond. The political establishment thought that we would just roll over. They thought that we'd lose interest, grumble into our beer and resign ourselves to living in an autocracy, where our voice would be much, much reduced until the time that it could be extinguished completely. Well, we didn't. As boring and tedious as Brexit often was, we still knew what we wanted. We knew the country still belonged to us, even if nothing else did. And we still knew, simple-minded as we may be, or at least as they would portray us, we still knew the value of true democracy. And we made sure we got it. I call that the Brexit spirit. Because that's no mean achievement. For 3.5 years, all the organs of the state, as well as much else, were against us. But they underestimated us. They thought that because we were so mild-mannered, generally so polite, so willing to make accommodations to others, to newcomers for instance, even when it would inconvenience ourselves, they called it tolerance. They thought that we were pliable, supine, even corruptible, and weak. But they judged us by their own standards. They are, by and large, richer and financially stronger than us. And I suppose that they thought we had no confidence in ourselves, probably because they didn't. And probably because they imagined that they would buckle if the roles were reversed. And in doing so, they underestimated us. Us, the British. That's happened before, hasn't it? It's happened a lot. I won't give an exhaustive list because I don't need to. But we do need to remember what has brought us to this point. We need to remember the Brexit spirit. Because our good-natured complacency nearly caused us to lose it all. It nearly caused us to lose our beloved country to the managerial blandness of the European superstate. It nearly happened. But it didn't happen because we displayed our Brexit spirit. We said, in effect, that this land is our land and it is up to us what happens to it. And when we make a decision, we expect and we demand that that decision is enacted. That's the Brexit spirit. And when we declare and insist that we remain the rightful owners of our own country, some may call it sovereignty. It is a statement of intent that really has no bounds. Tinkering around the edges of the drier points of the Constitution is all very well, but the Brexit spirit has the potential to change everything. It has the power not just to deliver Brexit in an advantageous and meaningful way, but also to give constituents some power and accountability over their MPs, by forcing them, for instance, to face their electorate when they have the temerity to change parties without seeking re-election. It can return to us our natural right to speak our minds by repealing the chilling and idiotic hate speech laws. The Brexit spirit has the power to right wrongs that have gone uncorrected for decades, and in the case of the Muslim rape gangs, for instance, prosecute not only the perpetrators, as is belatedly being done, but also those who turned a blind eye and allowed it to happen. It has the potential to roll back the surveillance state and stop them watching us all like rats in a maze. It has the power to enshrine in law limits on governmental power in a Bill of Rights that is as robust and as relevant as the US model, and that sits above the principle that says no parliament may bind its successor, since in practice that just means that there really is no limit to what a government can do to its citizens. Because the Brexit spirit makes the government the citizen and the citizen the government. The Americans know this concept as being of the people. So let us not slip back into trusting complacency. We can continue to believe in the inherent goodness of our fellow citizens, as we always have, but we must watch those who deign to govern us with an unblinking eye. They have form, and not just over Brexit. A decade ago was the expenses scandal. We forgave them when they were just stealing our money. This time they attempted to take our country from us. We cannot and must not trust them again. Invoke the Brexit spirit, because this country, this realm, still belongs to us.